Very warm welcome. This is one of the things I really enjoy doing, talking about bumblebees. And normally if I was in a room with you, I'd ask you to tell me what species of bumblebee this is, because that sometimes gives me a clue as to whether I've got any experts in the room. But I'm going to have to tell you that this is, Mike, a white-tailed bumblebee, and it's actually a female because it's got pollen in its baskets on its rear legs. So we call them casts, so it is a female cast, and it looks quite large, so it's probably a queen. This is just another lovely picture of a bumblebee. Obviously, I love bumblebees, so they're just so gorgeous, iconic creatures. I normally start off with a bit of an apocryphal story, and this is, but it illustrates something really fundamental. So over in China, there are thousands and thousands of acres of orchards, plums, pears, apples, cherries, you name it, just thousands of acres of them. And over the decades, they've sprayed to kill off the insects that are creating problems for that fruit they're producing, or eating the fruit that they're producing. But in doing so, they've killed the pollinators that they really need to pollinate the orchard trees. And you think that that couldn't possibly happen in this country? But not many people understand that we actually import 95,000 plus boxes of commercially farmed bumblebees to underpin our soft fruit industry in this country. And there's only some plants and some flowers that can only be pollinated by bumblebees. No other insect can. So, for example, oh, look at that. That's just a gorgeous bumblebee on a tomato flower. And one of the interesting things about a tomato flower is that it contains no nectar. So bees and flowers have co-evolved together over the millions of years. And the nectar has always been the bait that the flower uses to draw the bumblebee in. But in a tomato flower, there is no nectar, and the pollen is held very tightly in the anther. So this is the sort of thing that our tomato industry looks like. So if anybody has been to Thanet Earth, or the Lee Valley, where there's acres and acres of glass houses and they're growing these tomatoes, then they need bumblebees to do that. And it is by a process called buzz pollination. Now, I have got a video which we tested out earlier. So, Mike, I'm going to rely on you to thumbs up if you can hear the video.
This buzzing is a secret password, the key to a lock. What this bumblebee is after is pollen. Bumblebees eat pollen. It's high in protein. But the flower doesn't want to give it to just anyone, so it hides it away in those bright yellow anthers. For a flower, that's unusual. Most flowers keep their pollen on the outside of the anther, which is the male part of the flower. Pollen is basically sperm for plants. Most flowers make sugary nectar too. They use it as bait to attract bees and other pollinators, which get coated in pollen along the way. And since bees are messy, they inadvertently scatter some of that pollen onto the female part of the next flower they visit. That's how most flowers have sex. But this type of flower doesn't offer nectar. The only way to get to its pollen is through those tiny pores at the ends. But the bumblebee knows just what to do. It wraps its legs around the flower and bites down on the anthers, that male part of the flower. See those wings shaking? Normally, the bumblebee uses those powerful muscles to flap its wings. That's what makes the buzzing sound when they fly. But here, those muscles vibrate its whole body, so hard and fast that it makes a louder, higher-pitched buzz. This vibration shakes up the pollen trapped inside the anthers until it spews out all over the bumblebee. It's called buzz pollination, and you don't need a bumblebee to do it. A tuning fork will do. The bumblebee grooms the pollen down into sticky sacs on its legs, carries it back to the hive. Only a few types of pollinators, like bumblebees, are capable of buzz pollination. Honeybees can't do it. This field is kind of a free-for-all. Think Las Vegas buffet. Tons of food, but long lines. Lots of competition. Buzz pollination is more like a private club. By only permitting pollinators that know the secret knock, the flower ups the chances that its pollen will end up on flowers from the same club, the same species. The bumblebee? Well, sure, it has to work a little harder, and there's no sweet nectar. But it's a reliable pollen stash that almost no one else has access to. Tomatoes, potatoes, blueberries. All of these need buzz pollination to reproduce. Much of the food we eat owes its existence to that buzz.
So there are some wonderful things about bumblebees. Obviously, they are amazing creatures, but that buzz pollination, if you think about a bumblebee, it's got a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And one of the very clever things it can do, it can disconnect its wings from the muscles in its thorax, and it can vibrate those muscles at exactly 400 hertz. And that is exactly the vibration the tomato anthers need to open. And it's that magical thing about how these plants and insects have co-evolved together. So some of these are the crops that need bees, and where I live in Lymington, just across the river, we have Goodall's, the pick your own, and he uses the boxes of bumblebees because you get a better quality fruit, a better size fruit for his strawberries and his raspberries. And down in the right-hand corner where you've got a field picture of a field bean, one of the things I'll talk about is the length of bumblebee tongues. So again, another really key point about bumblebees is that they have a variety of tongue lengths. So of the 24 species, some have 2 millimeter tongues, and the longest one, which is the garden bumblebee, has 19 millimeter tongue. And what that means is that they can visit a much wider range of plants than other insects like honeybees. And they're also, one of the other really fascinating things about them is that they have this electrostatic charge on their fur. So do you remember when we all went to parties and we rubbed balloons on our hair and the hair would stick out? Well, that's the same with the bumblebee fur. They have a positive charge on their fur and a negative charge on the pollen. And of course, boom, it gets covered in pollen. They are exceptionally good pollinators for that reason alone. So the trust was asked some years ago, back in 2013, by the government, what was pollination worth in this country? Breaks my heart a little bit, because I think these creatures have an intrinsic value of their own. They're not here to serve us. Yes, we get a free service from them, which is pollination. But basically, the government needs to know how much they would lose if we lost all our pollinators. So some very clever scientists at Reading University, Professor Simon Potts and his team, worked out that if we lost all our pollinators, it would cost this country £691 million. However, what they couldn't work out was what it would cost to do the service that these creatures do for free. Because once they're gone, they're gone. And we can't, what are we going to do? Send our children up orchard trees with little paintbrushes? A bit different from the Victorian up the chimneys, but somehow we would need to pollinate. And it wasn't just the fruit and vegetables that we wanted to draw attention to. And you think about our dairy products and you think, well, Jill, cows eat grass and grass is wind pollinated. But I guarantee that the majority of pastures contain herbs. all which need to be pollinated, all which give a better quality of dairy. And something like clover, which needs a long-tongued bumblebee to pollinate it, is really important for the quality of the cows themselves and for the quality of the dairy. And then you think about all those creatures that rely on pollination. Without that service, the moles, the birds, the little dormice and field mice, where would they get all their food from? The way our gardens look, the colours in our gardens, that's all about it. The way our countryside looks is down to this really important ecosystem service, pollination. This was a supermarket in the United States where they took away one morning, they took away all the foods off the shelf that required pollination. Now we wanted to do this with Marks and Spencers as well, but they absolutely wouldn't hear of it. But what they did do is they made little sticky out cardboard handle type things with on their jams and their yogurts and on their fruits to say that you needed pollination for this. But this was a really good action for people to walk around a supermarket, olive oil or rapeseed oil. You wouldn't, if the rape's not pollinated, you're not going to get the oil. So there's millions and millions of products that require pollination. So the trust was formed in 2006. Many of you will know Professor Dave Goulson. He actually studied at Southampton University, and also his PhD student Ben Darville was at Southampton University. And they went and worked at Stirling University, and for a number of years before 2006, they did an awful lot of research on bumblebees, and they realised that they were in severe decline. We'd lost 2 to extinction. We had 2 on the edge of extinction, and we've got 6 at risk of our 24 species. And so it was Dave Goulson who set up the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. So there's different threads to our work, but one of the key things is that we're trying to restore habitat or create habitat to help our bumblebees thrive. Because after the Second World War, we lost 97% of our wildflower meadows, and that was the beginning of the decline of not just bumblebees, but of a lot of our insects and solitary bees as well. So in the beginning, when we first started working up projects, we focused our work on where there were rare bees. And we've got the rarest English bee is the shore-carder bee, which is down in Somerset, South Wales, and on the Kent estuary. There was 5 populations left. And then our second rarest bee is the great yellow bumblebee, which used to be widespread across the UK and now just clinging on Caithness, Sutherland, the Orkneys, Outer Hebrides, and that feeds on the maca. So we work our project areas to restore their habitat in the hope that we can get them to thrive. And we work across the board with anybody, a pony paddock to a farmer of thousands of acres, or the Ministry of Defence. Ministry of Justice, oddly enough, owns more land than the Ministry of Defence. You'd be surprised how much land the Ministry of Justice owns. So a lot of our work is habitat provision. These are just some of the people that we've worked with over the years. We have a consultancy service so that we can go, we have some land management advisors who will go out and look at whatever the farmer or the landowner wants to do and give them some very specific advice. We're also what's called trusted advisors to the government. They trust us, not sure it's reciprocated, but we sit on what's called the Pollinator Advisory Steering Group. Very fancy title, and we help the governments, all the different devolved governments, to create their pollinator strategies so that they can work towards restoring their pollinators in their different devolved countries. The best plan is the all-island one, without a shadow of a doubt. If you go on that pollinator plan, the resources there are absolutely amazing. Very, very good pollinator plan. We also do a lot of public engagement. Obviously, I'm here tonight to do that sort of thing. We need to educate and spread the word about these gorgeous creatures, to encourage people to be inspired by them, to want to help them. So public engagement is a big, big part of our work. We're a science-based, evidence-led charity. And so it's important to us to keep the research going. So our science manager this year, he is supervising 4 PhD students from different universities who are doing different research on bumblebees. So it's really important for us that we keep up to date, that the interventions that we are doing, the work that we are doing is actually saving the bees. So we do a lot of adding to knowledge. We've identified some of our knowledge gaps, and so we work with universities and with local councils as well to plug those gaps. That's a lovely bee. It beats its wings at 200 beats a second. Are amazing creatures. So what are bumblebees? Well, they're social insects, so they live in a colony, obviously flower visitors, and they're very hard-working pollinators. So they evolved in the Himalayas from wasps originally, and that's why they have this big furry coat, because they evolved to keep warm in very cold climates. But it also means that they can start work early in the morning when it's quite chilly and go to bed late at night when it's quite chilly, because they're able, again, through their thorax, vibrating those muscles, to keep them warm. So in the UK, we've got probably around about 250 species of bee, 24 bumblebees, 1 honeybee, and all the rest are solitary bees. And solitary bees are from fantastic wild bees as well. And there's a wonderful guy called Stephen Falk. So if you ever wanted a presentation on solitary bees, he's the guy. He's absolutely brilliant. And of course, all the bees get nectar from flowers and pollen for growth. And they have bumblebees have an annual life cycle. So I always put this slide up, and I was talking to Mike earlier and said, I'm sure that this crowd is a very intellectual crowd and know the difference between honeybees and bumblebees. We did some audience insights with a consultancy about 5 years ago now. And one of the pieces of data that came out of it was that 54% of adults didn't know the difference between bumblebees and honeybees. They thought they were the same. So it's really important that we keep the information about bumblebees right up there, because honeybees, however lovely they are, and I'm always worried because I'm not in the room with you, and that somewhere in this group there's going to be a beekeeper, and I've got to be nice about honeybees just in case there's a beekeeper in there. And they are good pollinators, and obviously they're lovely insects. But what's important is that they're not at risk of extinction, nor are they in decline. They are livestock, they are domesticated. It's so often you'll see Save the Bees, and you'll see hexagons, hives, pots of honey, honeybees. And it's a little bit like me saying, I'm going to save the birds, I'm going to keep chickens. So lovely as honeybees are, and they're very useful and vital for pollination, they don't need saving, unlike our bumblebees, which absolutely do need saving. And another lovely thing about bumblebees is that they have smelly feet, so that when they land on a flower, they leave a little pheromone scent on the petal. And then when the next bumblebee bumbles along, they can smell that. They know that the pollen and nectar has been denuded, so they don't have to waste energy landing on that particular flower. So I'm only scraping the surface of the wonder of bumblebees on this short presentation, but they are fascinating creatures and really worth diving into. And as I said, the main reason why bumblebees are declining is they are struggling due to flower shortages and habitat loss. But I'll come on to some other things that which are also making life very difficult for them. Oh, and up there, I've got 18 social species and 6 cuckoo species. I don't think I've got time to talk about cuckoo species today, but just think about the cuckoo bird, and it's a similar thing that happens. We do have a position statement and a policy on bumblebees and honeybees, and it's quite important because we work very effectively with beekeepers, particularly the London beekeepers, because a lot of the corporates see honeybees as a way of ticking their biodiversity box or their ESG box, whereas it can be that honeybees can actually be very detrimental to biodiversity by outcompeting every other insect there is. So we try to work with beekeepers, particularly where there's the rare bee areas, to say, please don't put your hives so close so that the competition is lessened. So I'll touch again on why they are declining. And obviously, on the left here, this picture of a beautiful wild meadow is what they love and what we've lost over the years. And a lot of our countryside now is monocultures. Now, this is a really complex story, which I can't really go into in any sort of depth today, but we work a lot with farmers, and we know that farmers are really important to this country, and most of them want biodiversity on their land. But we are a small island with a finite amount of land. We have a growing population. Unfortunately, we have a cheap food culture driven by the supermarkets. And the worst thing of all is we waste a third of everything that's grown. So there's a really complex story around farming and the way we look after our land. It's not easy. It's not an easy one. And there's such a lot of chat now on social media about farmers and what farmers are doing. But at the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, we work very effectively with them, and we would support them in their nature-friendly farming ways. So a lot of you would have heard of neonicotinoids. So when we were part of the EU, these were banned. So they're what's called a systemic insecticide. So they're mostly a seed coating, mostly on rape or sugar beet. And as the plant grows, it takes up the insecticide. The little weevil thing comes along that they don't want, takes a bite on the stem, gets a mouthful of neonics, and it dies. But what they didn't really realise, or whether they did or they didn't, is that that insecticide is then taken up into the pollen and nectar. And then when the insects come to feed on it, they get a sublethal dose, which really destroys their ability to build their nests, to forage, to find their way back. Since we've left the EU, the last government gave what's called derogations to the sugar beet farmers and some rape farmers to use these insecticides again. I'm not sure whether this current government will ban them, but from our perspective, they need to be banned. And then these lovely imported bumblebees. I'm sorry about the pound sign next to the 95,000. That shouldn't be there. I'll get rid of that on my next presentation. So you'll all remember ash dieback, where we gaily imported all those whips from Europe, only to find out they were diseased and killed all our native ash trees. Very similar with this. So these are imported under licence through Natural England. They have to be viral screened. The viral screening doesn't do a good enough job to know that they don't carry parasites that can be transferred to our native bees. So once they have done their pollination work, they have to be destroyed. They cannot be released into the wild. So some of the big firms that import a lot of these, and it is a global industry, they will have to put them in a freezer after they've done their pollination duty to humanely kill them. And I've got a little video just to finish off on that subject.
My name is Peter Greystock, and I use cutting-edge molecular techniques to explore the effect parasites can have on vital pollinators like bumblebees. There are over 250 species of bumblebee, and many have been showing declines for decades. It's likely that the introduction of parasites from commercially imported bumblebees may play a role in this. Bumblebees are imported on an industrial scale to help pollinate a number of important crops. But my PhD research showed that these commercially reared bumblebees were often infected with parasites upon arrival into the UK. If these parasites are passed on to native populations, they can cause serious harm. Through my research with the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, I developed methods using DNA technology to detect if the parasites in imported bees could pose a risk to our native bumblebee and honeybees. In response to my findings, Natural England will no longer allow non-native bumblebees to be imported into the UK from 2015, a policy which will significantly reduce the risk posed to native bees. Norway has also banned imports outright until suppliers can prove their bees are no longer infected. Further funding from NERC and Natural England has allowed me to start developing a screening process which could be used by those breeding and importing pollinators. This would ensure excellent standards of parasite detection across the industry. Detecting and understanding the harm parasites pose to pollinators has been pivotal in changing bumblebee import regulations, improving standards across the industry and increasing public awareness of the role bumblebees play in nature and in agriculture.
So we still work with Peter Greystock and he's continuing his research, and what we hope will come out of it will be better viral and parasite control. What we cannot do is we rely on these imported bumblebees 100% to underpin our soft fruit industry. So there's no way they could be banned at all. Just have to be managed. Okay, so just to finish up, all the more positive stuff about what we can do to help bumblebees, and we can all do something. This is a lovely common carder bee, the ginger bee. And the biggest one is gardening. If we all started gardening for bumblebees, it would make a massive difference. And we encourage people to try and garden, have something flowering in their garden throughout the bumblebee flight season. So right from February, March through to September, October. And we have an amazing apps on our website, which I'll come on to in a minute, which will allow you to really look and find out what are the best flowers for bumblebees. So most of the time it's old-fashioned plants, herbs. All the herbs are brilliant for bumblebees. Obviously the wild flowers are good for bumblebees. The alliums, the sort of bulbs, the spring bulbs are really good as well, so long as they're more of the old-fashioned ones and not being over hybridized just for some fancy central bits and something. You just need simple flowers. And this was a lovely case study where this was in Surrey on a park which was all closely mown grass, and there was football pitches and rugby pitches, a bit like Woodside Park in Lymington where I live. And we talked to the council there and said, could we just put in a strip of wildflowers? It'd make a huge difference to the insects there. And they ummed and ahed about it, and said okay. And then we talked to the residents. We got all the residents to the community centre and said, listen, the reason why we're doing this, the reason why it's important to have these flowers, and be warned, wildflower meadows look great for about a nanosecond and then they look rubbish. But the rubbishy side of things, when they're all dropping their seed and the birds can feed on them, is equally important. People have this view of a wildflower meadow as something really beautiful all the time. It isn't. It's usually like this, quite messy. And so the residents were engaged, the council were engaged, and they did this 3-metre strip, and look at it. And we gave them a management plan to keep it going. And I think it doesn't affect the rest of the playing field at all. But what a great place for the children to learn about all the different insects that are now in this really biodiverse strip. This was something we did with a school in Sussex, where the teachers wanted to do from seed all the way from flowers, collect seeds after pollination. So this is what we would call a pictorial meadow. It's annuals, but the children loved it. And they planted the seeds, they watched the flowers, they monitored the pollinators, and then they collected the seeds as a result and grew them on themselves. So it was a really good science subject for the kids. These are the ones you'll see in the garden centres, probably at this time of year as much as anything. And they are no good to any pollinator because they've been hybridised for their colour. They actually contain no pollen and no nectar. So we would really encourage you not to buy bedding plants. If all of us stopped buying bedding plants and bought herbs or other plants that have not been messed about and hybridised, our bees would flourish. So we have a tool called Be Kind, and it has over 700 different plants on it of the best plants for bumblebees. You can sort it by colour, by season, by sun, by shade, by all sorts of different sieves, number of petals, anything. And it's a really, really good tool if you want to, and you can score your garden for bee friendliness. So there's also some super plants on there, plants that are really high nectar content, really good nectar content for bees. So I mentioned that we had this audience insights work about 4 or 5 years ago, and out of it, apart from people not knowing the difference between honeybees and bumblebees, we also found out that people were very busy, bit worried about volunteering. The word volunteer was a bit of a heavy commitment for them. People didn't have a lot of money either. So out of all of this data, we designed this campaign called Be the Change. And it was predicated on micro actions, things that don't take time, money. You could just do deadheading of flowers in your garden to keep them flowering for longer. Talking to children about bumblebees and how lovely they are. And it's been one of our best campaigns that we've done. And that's also the resources that we've got on Be the Change are all free, all downloadable, really excellent. I think that's the same. We've just done a new website, so hopefully that's the same thing. But what a gorgeous picture. Look at that lovely bumblebee. And if you want to learn about bumblebees, we also, if you've got a smartphone, we have a free app. What's that? Bumblebee app. And it's got the 9 most common bumblebees that you can learn about, and you can click on them. And if you've got a clever child in your house, you can do augmented reality and you can get a bumblebee to fly around your garden or something. It is amazing. It's a really good app. And as I say, free. So I walk down Lymington High Street and people know me as the bee lady, and then somebody will come up to me and say, how are the bees doing, Jill? And I won't be able to answer that question without the science, and I wouldn't be able to answer that question without Bee Walk. So we started up Bee Walk in 2010. We worked with Butterfly Conservation on the same methodology, scientific methodology as they did, and we applied that and we launched it. And we had initially 35 bee walkers. Didn't give us a great amount of data or enough to analyse to any great extent. We now have over 1,000 bee walkers across the whole of the UK. And we are the only organisation in the world that has that data on bumblebee population distribution in this country. And our data is used across Europe. It's free to download, and the number of organisations, planners, and other organisations over in Europe that use it is a real legacy for this work. But without Bee Walk, I would not be able to say how the bees are doing. So how can you help? Talk to children. I think we've got to get the next generation just to love nature, let alone bees. You know, the moment they hear about bees, it's they sting or they buzz or flap flap. So we really need to get to talk to children about the love of bees. Obviously, you can leave a legacy. Most charities have a legacy team. Volunteering, you can become a bee walker, or you can do all sorts of other things. Karen and Steve are on tonight. They are our amazing volunteers in this area. Please garden if you have a garden, or if you have a flat and you have a balcony, or if you don't have anything, just a pot outside your door of lavender would be lovely. We work with a lot of corporates. Charity of the Year is a really good way of supporting us. Ask a friend. And that last one, buy organic produce and plants. Just imagine if everybody bought one organic produce in their shopping every week. Carrots, apples, whatever. What an amazing difference that would make to our organic farmers. It would be really, really good. In the run-up to the election this year, we created a Bumblebee manifesto. What if bumblebees could vote? And these are our simple 5 actions that we would like the government to take. It's early days, but we're hoping that we can get in front of them and really get pollinators and bumblebees in their sights. If I was in the room now, I'd shut and lock the doors and nobody would be able to leave until you joined as a member. So if you can join as a member, wonderful Christmas present, not too late. And we also have a lovely calendar as well, full of bumblebees. So that's our vision. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Jill. Absolutely excellent, as we hoped and expected it would be. Really interesting talk. If anyone's got any questions, you can indicate in the usual way of just waving and shouting or just speaking up, or you can use the React button at the bottom of your screen, the little heart-shaped thing where you can click on that and then it says raise your hand, and so you can do that if you wish to. So I'll just show that is me raising my hand, and you can also if you wish now change your view to a gallery view if you've not already done so, so you can see a picture of everyone across the team, as it were, and obviously unmute yourself if you just want to shout in. Whilst people are thinking of questions, if I've got any, I probably missed this, Jill, in your presentation. How many new queens can the previous queen breed?
That's really dependent on how big her colony is, how much forage she has. So it might be something like 50 queens would come out of a colony of, say, new queens would come out of a colony of, 300 to 400 bees in a colony normally. But those 50 queens, only 50% of them will survive. So not all of them go on to survive over winter.
Okay. Thanks. Ian.
And Vernon's iPad also waved at us as well.
Okay, we'll go to Ian first, then Vernon and Anthea.
Thanks for the great talk, Jill. Really interesting. And I really liked you talking about what we can do in our gardens. That's something I'm quite passionate about. But one of the things I always wonder about is it's so easy to get hold of pesticides for domestic use, which just seems a bit crazy to me that, you know, you kind of think of, at least of the farmers using a pesticide, they kind of know what they're doing. But when you can just go down the local shop and pick up something to just spray around your garden to kill bugs, it seems a bit crazy to me. Has there ever been any work with government to kind of get domestic use of pesticides banned?
A great question, and you know, you only have to walk into Otters or Everton Nursery, and the first thing you stumble across is Roundup or glyphosate or something for black spot, or, you know, kill or slug pellets. It's kill, 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 and changing people's hearts and minds and behaviours to think about having these creatures in their garden that may not make your garden look tidy or neat, or, you know, your roses don't have pretty petals or whatever, is a really difficult. But yes, we're working on a campaign to try and get, and that was in our manifesto, to try and get pesticide or insecticide use in gardens to persuade people it's completely unnecessary. Why would you do that? Let's get your balance of aphids in there that can feed the birds, and it's a really difficult one, Ian. I'm with you 100%. I don't use any insecticide or pesticide or anything in my garden. I just let nature take its balanced course. And yeah, my garden can look messy or plants die, but, you know, I'd rather that than cover the land with chemicals. I really would. But yeah, it's how do you persuade people? You know, me giving talks like this, and you all telling your friends and family, you know, how unnecessary it is. But yeah, great question, Ian. Thank you.
Vernon or Anthea? Oh, you're muted.
I'm no good at lip reading. Can you unmute them, Mike?
Yeah, we'll do.
Either that, or we'll have to hold up a bit of paper with the question on it. Hey, well done.
Well done. Thanks, Mike. Brilliant talk, Jill. Thank you very much. Our garden is not what you would call manicured. It's full of plants. If they choose to grow, we let them grow. And this last summer, we've had several bushes of a salvia family, hot lips. The white flower with the red lip.
Yeah.
And we've got one that grew massively in the back garden, about 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide. And from very early in the spring to, well, even now, there's a couple of flowers still on it. And the bumblebees have been covering it every day. And even though there's only a couple of flowers left, there's still a couple of bees visiting it. And it's wonderful. And to watch them, they enter the flower from the back, from the stalk end, with their sort of proboscis, whatever it is. and it's fascinating to watch. And I stood in the garden for ages just watching the bees.
Oh,
We've had up to 30 at least, when I've given up counting, but 30 on the top and all those inside it. And it's been so rewarding. So I'd say grow salvias.
Yes, salvias are excellent. I've also got a hot lips as well.
Yeah.
And you know, it's weird, the plants that the bumblebees go to, because I also grow heucheras,
Yes.
with all the coloured leaves. And they have a tiny stalk and tiny, tiny flowers.
Yes.
And yet the bumblebees love them. Same with Cotoneaster.
Yes. Yes.
You know, barely a flower you can see, but they love them. They're absolutely well done. I love hot lips. Yeah, it's a great plant. Salvias are very, very good.
And we grow a lot of tomatoes, so they obviously enjoy that as well. Brilliant.
Talking of tomatoes, Zoe's put in the chat that she's had so few insects in the garden this year she had to resort to an electric toothbrush to get her own pollen.
Wow.
Yeah, well, that is a way, Zoe, but, you know, sad, isn't it? Grow more flowers, get more bees coming in.
In terms of, I mean, you put up a lot of ideas of what people individually can do to promote bumblebees in their gardens. Obviously, planting the right plants is in some ways the easy thing, but is the nesting habitat as important, if not more important? Because if they've got nowhere to nest, so I know that Dave Goulston and others have produced, you know, bumblebee nesting boxes to take on the role of a mouse hole.
Yeah. It is, you know, they want, you know, bumblebees need somewhere to live, somewhere to and somewhere to feed, and somewhere to hibernate. Those are the three things that bumblebees need. If you've got, with regard to their nesting, I've got a garden full of bumblebee flowers, and they all nest in my neighbours' gardens. Oh, they'll ring me up, Jill, I've got a bumblebee nest in my garden. Really? How lovely. Never bothered to come into my garden. I did the most simple one is I got a big terracotta pot and put a slate over the top, and then I got some guinea pig material because I do like that smell of rodents material, and then I got a bit of hose pipe because bumblebees like to go underground, and I buried the hose pipe so the entrance was level with the lawn, and it went underground and up into the terracotta pot. Did they use it? No, they didn't. Just, it cost me nothing, but nonetheless. But if you've got hedges and you've got a lawn that goes up to the hedge, try and leave, you know, just half a metre or something that's unmown, so it's undisturbed. It's the undisturbed areas in the garden that's really important for bumblebees. And I just see from Phil here using, but yes, and that's really good, Phil. And tree bumblebees will use your tip boxes as well. So it is important to find somewhere where they can nest. They like compost heaps as well. Anything like that you can just leave undisturbed is really important. Yes, my neighbour across the road also has a swift box, and she had a bumblebee nest in it. But the one good thing about that was we were able to get up there after they had done their bit, and I had a lovely bumblebee nest before the wax moth got at it, which I put in a Tupperware pot to show children at school. So that was a win from that one anyway.
There's hope for our swift boxes yet then.
Yes.
Bees can get on.
I've never had a swift or a bumblebee or anything in my boxes.
Same, I'm afraid.
Mm.
Any other questions? Not that I can see. But Jill, that was absolutely fantastic talk and lots of food for thought, I'm sure. When we send round the link to everyone and to all our members that weren't on the call tonight, we'll make sure that we include a link to bumblebee conservation. Sorry.
Thank you.
Bumblebee conservation with a pointer towards the shop and the membership.
Lovely, thank you. And just remember, there's 2 BBC videos which we're not really allowed to copy and send on.
Yeah, when we do the recording, a couple of the videos, which are the BBC ones, will come out.
Lovely.
I have to say, my ears were pricking up when you were talking about the little radio transmitters on their not transmitters but reflectors on the back of the bumblebees, because we've been doing some green hoverfly research in the New Forest, and I'm just wondering if anyone's got the finance to do some radar tracking of green forest hoverflies. That'd be really
great, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
be good. Right, well, I'll leave you to it. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you about bumblebees, and hope to see you on my database as members very soon.
Thanks very much.
Happy Christmas. Have a good Christmas.
Thank you very much. Thank you.